Hello, and welcome to today's Consulting Corner. My name is Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Chief Agency Consultant here at Kite Technology Group. Today, we're going to talk about some of your options for configuring Epic and how it interacts with IVANS download. So let's take a look at some of the ways that you can configure interface within your Epic database to be customized for your agency. One thing to keep in mind once you have navigated to configure an interface and company broker is that you can copy out the configuration of the carriers to other carriers. So you don't have to go through every single one and make changes. And also, we would recommend that you copy out your configuration unless there's a specific situation with a certain company that needs to be configured differently from the rest of your carriers. Once you have a default interface company, or maybe you have a broker or something like that at the top of the screen that you're using to build out your configuration, you can click on Actions at the top of the screen and copy interface setup. From here, you can either select to copy the configuration out to all of the carriers that you have listed in your Epic database, or if you choose, you can change your view right here to copy the setup to just billing companies, just brokers, issuing companies, or for those that, again, do have a unique situation, you may just want to copy to issuing companies with the same billing company. Let's say, for instance, travelers might download something a little bit differently. You need to make a change just to that carrier and all of its issuing companies. You would start from that billing company and then make sure that you copy out to all of its issuing companies. Once you've selected how you want to copy or who you want to copy to, you do have the option down at the bottom of the screen to copy those items out to individual areas. So let's say you make a change over indirect bill commissions, you would just select that one, and then you can copy all of that information out to all of the other carriers, or again, just those issuing companies with the same billing company. Now, since I haven't made any changes yet, I'm not going to do any copying today. So we're going to click on cancel and move on into our download options, this first tab that we have listed here. Now, notice that there are several different application details. This is where you can select the policy type that is going to be downloaded when this specific policy type or policy detail is downloaded from the carrier. So let's say the carrier sends over a business auto detail. What is your policy type code that it's going to download to? In this case, it is our business auto, the BAUT listed right here. You may have some different scenarios. You can always reach out to your carrier. If, for example, you want your business owner's detail to download as a commercial package, you do have that option as well with some carriers. So be sure to reach out to them and see what your options are if you're having any issues or would like a change there. Now, down at the bottom of the screen, of course, we want to make sure that it downloads any company unique coverage codes. That's pretty standard, but you also have the ability to customize your exception report. Now, this area is going to identify what's going to show up on the exception report on your com log that when a premium is increased to either a certain percentage or dollar amount, it will actually notify you that on the exception report. And in just a few minutes, we're also going to look at how you can configure Epic to generate an activity for that as well. Do note, though, that you can select either a dollar amount or a percentage. So in the case where maybe 15% might be a pretty small amount when it comes to a personal lines policy, you may want to add in a dollar amount. You'll see here that we've just added in 150 as an example, but of course you want to customize this specifically for your agency's needs. All right, so let's move on into our status codes. So the next section that we are going to look at configuring is going to be your status codes. Now, this area is where you'll see what type of status is being downloaded by the carrier. So this is the actual policy download now. So when this code comes through from the carrier, we've got things like new business quote, new business, non-renewal, and so on. When that code comes into a policy download, we are going to tell Epic what we want to do with that specific policy code. Now, you'll notice that there is actually some determination by agency, branch, department, and profit center here. This means that you can actually configure how you want this code to act when it comes into one of those different structures. So let's say you want personal lines to have a different activity code that's configured differently, or maybe you don't want an activity code to download for that specific policy detail, that's where you can actually break this down. So if you click on your edit button at the top of the screen, you'll see here that you could highlight one of these codes and click on edit. And from here, you can edit a lot of the different policy code status, but if you did want to make a change to a specific structure, you would click on the add button here. And that's going to allow you to change this detail down to, again, a different agency, different branch, department, or even profit center. So keep in mind that you will need additional activity codes configured if you're going to have those act a little bit differently, but this is where you can make a change to that structure. So if you have a branch or department or agency acting any differently or needing that different configuration, you can do that here. Also note that that's going to be in each of the screens that we're going to look at today. So you can configure each of these areas that we're looking at by that different structure if needed. Now, the next area that you will note you can configure is going to be the policy status. You do want to make sure that you are updating policy statuses as needed. Obviously, there's going to be some things that we don't want it to update the policy status on, so we won't put one in there. But we do have a couple of different statuses that would be configured. Things like a new business quote, new business, of course, we want that to go in. Now, when it comes to the new business status, though, we probably don't want to update that policy status. And so we would click on that edit for that one. The reason why we wouldn't want it to update our new policy to a new business or new policy status is because that new policy coming in may be from a new carrier, but it's actually a rewritten policy. So as long as you have your rewrite policy in Epic, you can make sure that it doesn't update that status and overwrite what you have listed there, being a rewrite to a new. So we definitely would want to make sure that that would be one that would not update. So here we will come into this screen and say, no, just don't update that policy status. Another thing that you can do in this section is you can also set it to update the premium or not update the premium. So you want to think about things like, if this is new business, obviously want the new premium to come in. If it's renewal business, yes, we want the premium to come in. So, but for something like a cancellation, we probably don't want to make any changes to your estimated premium and commission because we need that to show what that annual was. Now down further, you'll notice that you can also configure activities to generate when this policy download occurs. Most of your default download activities are listed in your activity codes, but this is where if you wanted something to act differently by the structure, you would need to build out some additional activities. So maybe you have a DNew for your personal lines, and maybe you go with CNew for commercial lines. And then you can configure those codes differently over in the activity codes. We'll talk about the premium increase and decrease in just a second because I have that configured for you already. So I'm going to click on finish here and let's navigate over to something like a renewal. So everybody wants to know when a renewal comes in, if there's a premium increase. Some also want to know if there's a premium decrease. So if you edit your renewal or renewal quotes, you can also add additional activities to reflect that there has been premium increase or premium decrease downloaded. Now, once you have that information, once that activity comes in, it's going to tell you what that percentage of increase or decrease is, as well as drop that into the activity notes for you. So you could potentially get a DPRI activity along with a DREN activity if you have both of those configured. You also could just have the premium increase activity configured and not have the renewal activity configured. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of mix up the configuration based on how you want that information to be relayed to the end users. Another really neat feature here. Oh, and let me back up just a second. So that premium increase or premium decrease I told you a minute ago is going to be related to your exception report. So that's where that's pulling that information from. If there is an exception, then that is when your premium increase or premium decrease activities will download for you. So of course, with this area, you can use activities to notify all of your staff that this policy download has occurred, as opposed to a comm log that is pretty traditional. This gives your users an activity to work with once they have received that download of whatever that policy change or new policy is in your system. Another thing to note in this area is that you do need a default who owner. So if, for example, you have some activities configured to default to an account manager, but there's no account manager on a specific policy, you'll need to default somebody who's the backup. In this case, we have selected an employee, but you could also select a work group in this situation. You can also identify what type of business you want to download for this specific carrier, as well as what the level is affected of the premium when you're going to download those premiums into the policy as well. So here we have chosen to update both the policy and line level, which will be helpful with either a policy level report or a line level report. And in addition to that, we've selected to only update the estimated premium. The reason why we update only the estimated is because if you are updating the annualized and you're downloading direct bill transactions that may also be affecting the annualized premium, it can get a little out of hand and a little messy, but I have seen some good combinations of configuration for that as well. So just keep that in mind. That is a possibility that it could overinflate your annualized premium if you have both selected here and your transaction codes are also updating annualized premium. Now, some of the other areas that you could configure would be your direct bill section. So if you are downloading direct bill, you can identify that you want to receive direct bill commission download, update the premium and commission as well. And you can also identify how you want those transactions to add to the billed premium and commission on your policy when you are adding those. So we do recommend that you add that to the line level. Again, that line level is going to roll up to the policy level. So it's always good to start your transactions at the line level so you get both of those data fields completed. You can identify whether or not you want to file those items as reconciled or even finalize the statements. I would caution against finalizing statements when they come in. Gives you a little bit more freedom to make mistakes or fix things when you don't have things finalized. So just keep that in mind. And then you'll see here, we don't have all of the transaction codes listed because this is a demo database, but you can also identify what transaction code you want to come in when a specific transaction accord code is sent over from your carriers. So now let's take a look at the claim section. In this area, of course, you have some options for accepting claims download or not accepting it, updating existing claims, or creating new claims on CLI transactions. You'll also want to make sure that you select a default who owner like we did in the previous status code screen. Anytime you have activities configured, you will need to select who the backup is in case there's not a person listed on the policy based on what your selection is in the activity itself. Many of these activities are probably set to closed. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of a duplication of information coming over from claims download activities. So it's nice to have those come in, be documented on the account so that you can refer back to that information. And once you've kind of tested out that claims download, you may find that you might want a little bit different configuration here as well. And again, keep in mind that you can configure this by your agency branch department and profit center. Now, one of the last areas that we're going to review is going to be your EDocs and messages and some of the configuration options you have for this area. You'll notice, of course, you can identify whether or not you want to accept EDocs and messages. You may, again, run into some unique situations where you might not want to receive those EDocs and messages from certain carriers. You can also turn that off over in your IVANS dashboard, so just keep that in mind. However, I do recommend that you explore all options. Some carriers allow you to turn off any type of email notifications and use your eDocs as an alternative. So the documentation is coming directly into Epic instead of it going through email and eDocs. So just keep that in mind. Reach out to your carriers and make sure that you understand what your options are. And again, if you're having any issues with any type of downloads, you can always reach out to your carrier as well. But we know that sometimes carriers just are not all created equally. And so again, you may need to configure a specific carrier a little bit differently from what your standard configuration is of all of your other carriers. So down here in the EDocs section, you'll notice again, we've got the breakdown by structure if you'd like to add some additional structure in there. But you'll have also a lot of different codes that are going to come in from the carriers. So this code is actually the code that's coming over from IVANS and how the carrier identifies what this document is. So once they have identified what that document is, you're going to get a description. And then you can configure an activity code that you would like to download with that. Many times what we see is that there are specific buckets. So things like EDoc for anything that's kind of generic and we're not exactly sure what's going to come in with that document. Or you may have something that is a little bit more specific, like here we have the EPAU, which would be a premium audit type document. So you can kind of bundle different ones together. Think about things like eBill, EREN for renewal documents, ENEW possibly for new policy documents. So you can certainly specify what those EDocs codes are, and most Epic databases now already have some of those pre-configured for you. So if you have some out-of-the-box configuration that already has a few of those split out, that's certainly a great way to start. And if you wanted to add a little bit to that, you can also create new EDoc activities as well. Keep in mind, in those activities, you can also configure the field defaults. So you can identify how you want that information to come in. So if you want to, you could say, policy downloaded effective 1/1/2025 commercial package. So you have a lot of options for configuring those activities as well as the interface itself, even though today we're just looking at interface itself. So keep in mind, if a document is actually going to download, or if you suspect that a document may download with this type of code, in addition to an activity note, you can also identify what folder you want that document to go to. And you can also identify a custom description. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We'll click our edit button over here. And in this screen is where you would identify how you want to configure that specific document that's going to come in and what type of activity code and folder and so forth. So here you can choose an acceptance status. If you do need to make any changes to a certain type of document, you can do that individually. You can also identify that code as well as how do we want to create that code. Most often we recommend configuring your activity code actions at the activity level, but you do have an opportunity to change that here too. You can, again, like I said, choose a folder and or subfolder that you would like to attach that document in when it comes into Epic. You can set security access for that as well. So remember, you can configure different security access. You can make it automatically client accessible in the CSR24 client portal. So if you wanted to do that, you can certainly do that here. And then we can override with a custom attachment description. So here you'll see that I have selected that option and I have clicked on edit custom description already to identify that I want this to say the policy effective date, the policy type code, notification of audit in dispute. So instead of whatever the carrier would label this document as, it's going to come in with my custom description. Now, there are a few little quirks throughout carriers, so keep in mind that it may not always use your actual field defaults, just kind of depending on how that carrier is sending that information. Again, like with anything in download, we always recommend testing that first before you do a large scale change. To see if there are any quirks or unique things with a specific carrier that you need to keep in mind when receiving those downloads. So one of the latest releases that has occurred in download updates is going to be the Personal Lines Renewal Insights feature. If you'd like to know more about this, you can always go over to your Resource Center, select your Epic release notes, and this was a release that happened in a previous update, which was in April of this year. So if you click over to your April 2025 updates, you'll see in the What's New section some information about your Personal Lines Renewal Insights. Now this is for personal auto and home policies, for Epic to generate an activity along with a PDF with information about what has changed from one policy term to the next. There are two very specific activity codes. You'll note those here in the instructions that you will need to be sure to configure in your system. Once those are configured, you'll be able to see those renewal insights, which is going to run every night around 3 a.m. At that central time zone frame. And once that happens, you'll see those activities populated the next day for any policies that renewed manually or by download in the previous day. So keep in mind, this is not a real-time function. It is something that is going to run overnight each day. So let's take a look at what those activities look like and some of the insights that you will be seeing. So keep in mind, we are in our demo database, so we don't make a lot of changes from one renewal to the next. So you'll see here, there's not a whole lot of change, but you kind of get the idea of how this activity is going to work. So you'll notice down at the bottom of the screen in our last note entered on this 7777 activity that you'll see differences in your premiums as that policy is renewed. You will also see if there are any changes to coverages, limits, and deductibles. Again, not anything listed here, but you get the gist of what that information is going to be that's going to populate into the activity for you. In addition to that, if you navigate over to your policies, you can access the attachments that are associated with that policy. Here, we'll note, and I have that set to show only important policy documents, so we'll switch that over. Once I switch that over, you can see that there are auto policy renewal insights. This is the document that is going to break down all of the changes that have occurred. So you actually have a document that could be used to present to your client any of the changes that have occurred from the prior term into that renewal term. And again, you'll see that there's a lot of different details in here on the policy as far as the vehicle itself, your coverages, limits, and deductibles, and so on. So this is a great new tool to use. We highly encourage checking this out. Definitely test it out with your own agency and get a little bit more insight. This is a great new feature that is offered by Applied. So always want to take advantage of all of the cool and new things that are available in Applied Epic. All right, that's all for today. We hope that you have enjoyed this webisode of Consulting Corner and have gained lots of knowledge that you can take back to your agency to customize and configure your use of Download and Applied Epic. Have a great day.